poor Roman, pushing whataboutism and all the usual good Russian shit they always push. Bye Roman, in the end you are just a Ruski. Well guys, what can I say, this is it, the news finally came in, I am no longer considered a good Russian.
Привіт з Одеси, mama, в Україні. Greetings from Odessa in Ukraine. And now, just behind me you have the Black Sea. And on the other side of that Black Sea is Georgia, where now resides the YouTuber, the Russian YouTuber I'm about to react to, Roman. And he has a channel, and ostensibly he's opposed Russia's wars against Ukraine, both starting in 2014 and 2022. And I made a reaction video to him almost 2 years ago now, where I outlined my disappointment, not just with him, but also that section of society in Russia and how they have behaved. And he is still moaning and full of self-pity, claiming that now people say he's not a good Russian. Hey, on this channel we never called you a good Russian. In today's video, we're gonna go into a little bit more as to why. So, поехали!
But also I pointed out the discrepancy between how Russian citizens are treated because of the actions of their governments and how Israeli citizens are treated because of the actions of their governments. And in the video I specifically said that I do not want Israeli people to be sanctioned like Russian people because that is not even my point.
So that was more or less my criticism of Roman. It must be about 18 months ago I made a video outlining how Russians like Roman who oppose Russia's extended invasion of Ukraine, which started on February 24th, 2022, and oppose Vladimir Putin in general, I think, and his government, but at the same time don't take any active steps to actually be a dissident, to try and undermine the war effort. They're more or less not supporting it, but at the same time not really doing anything concrete to stop it or to change direction of the government. I know that's obviously difficult with Russia since it's a dictatorship, a more and more fascistized totalitarian dictatorship going in that direction. So it's not as easy as protesting or becoming a dissident in, say, a liberal democracy. But at the same time, guys like Roman complain here on YouTube every so often about how tough their life is and people shouldn't take any measures, foreign governments shouldn't take any measures against Russians just because it inconveniences his life. And remember, this guy is a public figure. He makes his entire career out of commentary here on YouTube about Russia. He's not some guy who goes to work as a mechanic or has something out of the public eye on this topic. He still conforms, he still complies with Russian law, even on the language to describe the special military operation. Obviously it's a war, but he still goes along with it. And he had the audacity to make a video trying to compare the situation of Russians with that of Israelis and trying to say, well, the West doesn't sanction Israelis. Now, other countries, of course, do sanction Israelis, ones that are against Israeli foreign policy, in particular with the Palestinians. But let's, his argument, let's ignore that and say, well, the West, which by and large, not entirely, but in part agrees with Israel's policy, doesn't sanction. He thinks that they should just remove all sanctions of Russians just because Israelis don't face the same level. When obviously the West or the European Union and the US is what he really means, are completely against Russia's policy. In Ukraine, it is an illegal, unprovoked war. It's an imperialistic war. I think he agrees with that. Ukraine didn't attack Russia. I think more or less every sane person can agree with that. They just simply invaded because they want to take back parts of their former empire. And actually, just an aside, this week when I'm filming this, Vladimir Putin signed a decree basically claiming that every part of the former Russian empire that has left is all illegitimate. So that would include Finland, in theory, obviously the 3 Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, Poland, and places like Kazakhstan, and even Alaska. In principle, I don't think he signed it with that in mind, but in theory, he's also saying that the sale by the Russian Empire of Alaska to the United States is also legitimate. So the two comparisons, if we compare the situation with the war in Gaza, I don't want to open a Pandora's box, Israeli Palestinian relations are not my forte. But there was, on October 7, 2023, obviously an attack by Hamas, which is in control of Gaza, on Israel, on civilians, with a huge massacre, in particular at a music festival. Hard to compare the two situations. And yeah, that's just the general adage. He's just looking for a way out to claim that he shouldn't face any inconveniences in his life, at the same time when he is not a dissident against the Russian government.
I'm gonna try to keep the fucking chipmunk running in the wheel, because that's what my life feels like. I'm gonna make this content. I'm gonna, make funny faces in front of the camera. Hopefully you guys watch and donate, and hopefully I'm gonna make it out this fucking nightmare.
So yeah, let's go on and watch just briefly some clips from him. And it is just very disappointing. After 18 months, we still have to see this sentiment. And he has his whole quasi-incel crew around him that he seems to associate with, who also make this kind of content saying, oh, lift all the sanctions on Russians, basically, just because they think that Russians shouldn't face any inconvenience in their life if they decide to travel or live outside of Russia. Let's see. So let's pull up this other vlog.
Another thing, right, that I kind of wanted to touch upon is Serbia, has also become a place of refuge for a lot of anti-Putin Russians, or just Russians in general, that are trying to flee from the country right now and establish a new life somewhere else. Serbia is, one of those countries that allows Russians entrance visa-free, so and it's pretty relatively easy to actually legalize here and basically get a residency or whatnot. So Serbia is among Armenia, Georgia, and other certain post-Soviet countries like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, where a lot of Russians are going right now and sort of settle in. Montenegro as well. What actually would be interesting is that, once again, we've been talking about, Serbia being Z and whatnot, but actually what's sort of interesting is that most Russians that are coming here right now, they're not Z. No. So for them, it's sort of weird. What happens here...
By the way, Z means being pro this war. In Russia, they use that symbol Z or Z quite a lot on their military equipment. They also use V as well, but Z is the one, or Z is kind of an expression to be Z, or anti-Z as a Russian means to be pro or anti this war.
What happens here a lot in Serbia, actually, for example, is Russians actually throw anti-Z sort of pro-Ukrainian rallies here, and we've actually seen one when we were out in Belgrade on the streets.
So this is an example he's showing of concrete action against the war, going to a protest. He filmed it there, but is he a participant in this protest? Or he's using some footage from it. Don't see him there.
Belgrade, they had the different Russian flag. What was it, the white with
the blue stripe? White, blue, white, yeah.
And they were also, commemorating Navalny as well, right, over there. So you do have that democratic liberty to express your political beliefs.
So they're in a crux. His friend even says Roman has the ability to express his beliefs openly in Serbia. He could join that protest. He could wear that white and blue flag if he wanted to, if he were a dissident to the Russian regime, but I haven't seen on his channel in 2 years. So he has the ability, he just doesn't want to. Has he raised money for Ukrainians? Have I seen a fundraiser on his channel? Nope. No interest apparently in helping Ukrainians, which is the main way to stop the war, is that Ukraine stops Russia militarily and that it survives and retakes all its de jure territory. That is the way to defeat Russian imperialism. And then, as a consequence, there will be an opportunity to reform the Russian state. Hopefully it will have a brighter future and for its own citizens in terms of standard of living, less corruption maybe, and definitely less war by invading its neighbors. But no, he doesn't do any of that. It's completely absent from his channel. And why? Well, it would be in violation of Russian law. So why is he so worried about Russian law? He doesn't live in Russia. Is he planning to go back at some stage and live under Putin regime? I don't know, or maybe he's hedging his bets. But he's definitely not becoming a dissident. This is an important difference. What's the future of Russia if the small part of Russian society that actually opposes the war? Because there's no evidence that the majority of Russians are against it. Unfortunately, it's more likely that it's actually just a small minority that really oppose the war. We're not even talking about dissidents, which is just a tiny, tiny percent. Is it even 1%? If you look at Russia's 140 million people. So it's just disappointing. And there are alternatives here on YouTube if you watch other content. As I said in that video 18 months ago, you have guys like Konstantin, who has a channel Inside Russia. You have Zach the Russian, who actually stands with that flag behind him. And they openly criticize the Russian government, actually I would classify as dissidents here on YouTube, and they live outside the country. So very different situation to what you see with Roman.
All I did in my video is suggest that maybe perhaps the West is slightly hypocritical when it comes to the question of, first of all, the reaction of the West to indiscriminate bombing of children. Here's the thing, I'm not even calling for Israeli citizens to actually get these, pushbacks, and for Israeli citizens to get fucked as much as we did. Because guess what, guys, I'm a human being. And I realize that not every single person in every country is a hive mind that thinks the exact same thing. And also, I don't think that every single human that comes from a particular country is responsible for the leaders of their country, especially if we're talking about an authoritarian dictatorship, which Russia is. But yes, in the video I did draw some parallels between Israel and Russia and a lot of their propaganda.
So there again, making this pretty poor comparison because he just wants sanction relief for himself. That's all he's interested in. He sums up a part of Russian side that I've met when I've traveled to a place like Kazakhstan, because I was there just after the mobilization in Russia. It was around October 2022. And I met guys who were pretty similar profiles to Roman, roughly the same age, like they were like say between 25 and 40, more liberally minded than the average Russian from Moscow and St. Petersburg, hanging around at the hipster beer house basically in Almaty. Post the war had left because they didn't want to risk being dragged into it, or like Roman, who left not because he was about to get drafted into the army, but because he was worried more that they would cut off his AdSense, his income, if he were staying in Russia. So for them also, a lot of them were leaving because, yeah, their economic opportunities were going to be restricted. And I hung around and had a beer with guys very similar to Roman, and they didn't feel any compulsion to do anything to try and change Russia. They just wanted to emigrate somewhere else where they didn't have to deal with it. That's why there's no hope or little hope for Russia. If the people who don't agree with it just want to leave, still be Russian, more or less proud to be Russian, and just emigrate somewhere else and not have to deal with it, and probably even go back every once in a while with their remittances, then how do you change the country? There's a reason, I believe, why Putin let guys like this out of the country. He wanted to have a safety valve to let these people out so that they wouldn't try to maybe change the country, right? Just let this section of society leave, and then, yeah, he still has millions of other men he can obviously eventually persuade into the army, which is what he's been doing now with money. Yeah, but this is the part of society that could change things. That isn't. And what do they expect? That the Ukrainian soldiers are going to remove the Russians from every last square kilometer of Ukraine, and then what? Go all the way to Moscow afterwards and have a regime change so people like Roman could go back and elect a government? Not likely to happen, right? So it's this abdication, from my point of view, from a section of Russian society that's really, really frustrating to see, disappointing. And ultimately sits here on the internet complaining about his situation as if he deserves something better. He's not sitting under Russian rocket attack like we are in Ukraine, more or less a daily basis at the moment. You hear the air alert, you don't know, you look at your phone, a drone has hit something maybe a kilometer away, or now there are going to be some ballistic rockets fired at us. Should I feel sorry for him? Absolutely not. Should I feel sorry for this section of Russian society? No. Would I classify them as the bad Russians? No, they're not the ones who promote the war, that agree with it, go and fight in it. Obviously, they're not on that level, but they're also not the good Russians either, in my opinion. And a few days ago, Roman came out with another video explaining how tough it is to be a dissident.
I'm pretty sure we all know that if you're a Russian citizen who lives in Russia and also decides to criticize its government and its
special military operation in Ukraine,
you might be in a lot of trouble. In 2022, Russia passed a new law about discrediting the military of the Russian Federation, which made it so that challenging Russia's narrative about the war in Ukraine and criticizing the Russian army, or even possibly just saying the word war, could give you a prison sentence from 5 to 15 years. Well, what if I told you that even outside of Russia, criticizing the Russian government can still be very dangerous for Russian citizens?
As a Russian, even outside of the country, you might be living in a country that has reasonably good diplomatic relations to Russia, and they may even deport you back to Russia. The Russian government requests that extradition, or you might have some complications with your visa or gaining citizenship in your new country, because if you are tried and convicted in absentia by Russia, then you would have a criminal record. But again, these are just excuses for his own inaction. He is not a dissident. No one is pretending that being a dissident doesn't come with some disadvantage, that you might have some problems. But the price of inaction will be even higher as a collective for Russians than the price of action now as a collective. So people like Roman, what is he doing that's constructive? What is his role? Is he even helping Ukrainians? Is he even going down to volunteer at a shelter for Ukrainian refugees? I didn't see any of it. He doesn't want to help. He wants to sit there, moan, and monetize, and then get some immigration plan to live in the European Union. And he wants all Russians to have this, regardless of whether they support the war or not. And I have also met some Russians living in the European Union who just say very bland things like, oh, I'm against all war, but then they support Putin, which is not Roman's case, to be clear. He's not supporting Putin. But what kind of immigration policy should we have? Should we be taking in non-dissidents from Russia? Again, the Russian foreign policy is that they claim the right to intervene militarily to protect Russian speakers or Russian citizens wherever they happen to be. Why would we want these people coming unless they are distant, unless they're doing something proactive to help both Ukraine and undermine the current Russian government's war against us? Because this war risks eventually, if Russia is not stopped here, it is an empire, it is an imperial mindset. That's what it has. It will keep going. Maybe the next place won't be in Europe. Maybe it will be in Central Asia. Maybe it will be in Europe. Maybe it will be in the Baltics, Poland. Maybe it will be Finland. Maybe somewhere else that we haven't even thought about, where they see an opportunity to strike. Empires are stopped. That's the bottom line. They're stopped by people standing up to them. So, yeah, not buying this. Again, just monetizing his moaning, basically, is all he does.
I guess that's just the way it is.
And Roman, I know you're going to be sent this video. You're probably going to watch it. So do us all a favor, stop whining on YouTube. There shouldn't be any sympathy for you. You're basically asking for no consequences for what your country does and to have a free immigration plan to the European Union, because apparently living in Georgia, Kazakhstan isn't what you want to do in life. And I even saw an update video, finally, apparently you're going to be able to immigrate to the European Union on a temporary basis. But you're not a dissident. You're not someone who should be actively supported. If you decide to change your mind and support Ukraine, do something actually concrete against the government, then, I'll have a different opinion about you. Until then, you're not sitting under rocket attack. You're not maybe going to sit there with no electricity if Russia takes it out. And there are other Russians who do a lot more, who oppose the government politically. They produce content in YouTube, both in English and in Russian. Some even join the Ukrainian military to fight on the front lines in eastern and southern Ukraine. What the hell do you do to help the situation? So maybe if you want special treatment, do something special. Do something to help Ukraine concretely, other than moan that all Russians should suddenly get sanctions relief because it's inconvenient for your life. Anyways, enough said. Slava Ukraini. Horom slava do перемоги. So while Russians like Roman are frustrated and complaining about their lack of relocation options to move from Russia to further west in Europe, on my channel, I'm helping guys do completely the opposite. I'm helping them to relocate for at least part of the year from North America, Latin America, and Western Europe to what I am dubbing New Europe. And if you don't know what New Europe is, if you haven't seen that video, I have it linked above on a card, down below in the description. Go watch that after this video to understand that concept a bit better. Now, behind me here, we have the Odessa Opera House, one of the symbols of this city. And unfortunately, with the Russo-Ukrainian war, I have not been bringing clients for 2 years now to live the in-person experience here in Ukraine. But fingers crossed, in 2024, that will become possible once again. Actually, last week was in Lviv in the west of Ukraine, and there I met up with a client who had lived the in-person experience with me in 2021 in Kharkiv, and he was there with his wife, who's from Zaporizhia, and was interesting talking to him because now he wants to split his time between the States, where he's originally from. He's bought a place in Mexico, and he wants to buy somewhere in Kyiv, get residence here in Ukraine, and spend part of the year also in Ukraine. So there are guys starting to consider coming back in spite of the Russo-Ukrainian war, as the situation and the front line stabilize a bit, and cities like Odessa are not in any immediate danger, same with Kiev, of being occupied by Russia. So that is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel here for considering Ukraine as an option. But in the meantime, I have been bringing my clients to alternative places like Riga in Latvia, and up there was with a client earlier this month, lived it up in Riga, and obviously it's in the European Union. Standard of living is pretty high in development vis-a-vis countries maybe like here in Ukraine or Moldova, another place where I've been bringing clients for the last few years with this war. And Riga is the land of leggy blondes. If you are a single guy and you like tall and blonde, then Latvia has some of the tallest people in the world and some of the blondest, so it may be your place to consider to go to. As I said, I've been bringing clients also to magical Moldova, or Mad Moldova, crazy Chisinau. Moldova is the country that I feel is the closest in terms of culture to Ukraine. Now, Chisinau as a city is smaller than here in Odessa, and it does not have the seaside, but there are a lot of similarities in terms of the culture, and definitely going out and partying and having fun. The social life for a smaller city like Chisinau is pretty impressive, in particular during the summer months. Have made several vlogs from Chisinau over the years. Always a great spot to consider. And I've also been bringing clients to Warsaw, which I am dubbing the capital of New Europe. And as the capital of Poland, it is a country and a city that have been booming for a long time now, probably 15 years. Obviously, Poland entered the European Union a long time ago already. It was back in 2004. So we're almost up to the 20th anniversary of that event. So there, the standard of living is quite high, and the standard of development in the city is quite high, and it is already the capital of this region at the moment. They're also rolling out Rail Baltica that will connect Warsaw to the capital cities of the Baltic states, so Vilnius, Riga, and Tallinn, eventually on into Helsinki and Finland. There's actually going to be a high-speed train that will come online in the next few years, so definitely exciting times to consider Warsaw. Also, if you are a single guy relocating, then Warsaw has pulsating nightlife, and you have large diaspora communities from here in Ukraine and also from neighboring Belarus who have gone there in the last few years. So in addition to the Poles and Polish culture, you also have that as an attraction. And finally, the other place I've been bringing clients is to amazing, almighty Almaty in southern Kazakhstan, just off the steppes of Central Asia. It is a city with incredible nature nearby, with the mountains, the lakes, and the canyons of southern Kazakhstan. It is a developed city, and it's full of very friendly Kazakhstanis on the whole. So also being a very interesting option for my clients to consider on the in-person experience, and possibly for relocation between, as I said, minimum of 3 months up to a year is what I recommend for these cities. So if you are interested in living the Czar experience with me, Connor Klein, in one of the cities and countries that I've outlined here at the end of this video, then down below is a link to my application form. It is by application only. And if it doesn't work out that it's a good fit to come live the in-person experience together, then it may be a good alternative for us to jump on a consulting call where I can advise you best about this region and what your optimal options will be for 5x in your lifestyle, spending time here. And I know that one of the biggest issues that guys have encountered that they tell me is coming to this region and not being able to integrate and build up a social circle, ending up Billy no mates, or they just end up in a very low value social circle. Like Roman himself is kind of an example of that, because he hangs out with these incel-like characters who also have YouTube channels. The kind of guys who don't get girls and become bitter and resentful towards the guys who do, like your Irish boy here apparently. So You don't want to end up in that situation. You need to build a high-value social circle in the country you move to because it's going to be a game changer for you. And that is one of the things that I can help you with, whether it's in person, if we come together, or on a consulting call. So also there is a link to that in the description. And just before I go, if you're new to this channel, you've just come across it now, then maybe go and check out some of the playlists I put together. So most important one is the cities. I'm going to link up on a card down below in the description, the cities that I bring my clients to in person. And there's actually even some older vlogs there from cities I used to go to before the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, the extended invasion. And there you get a good flavor of what I do in person with clients and where we go to. And as a famous Canuck ice hockey legend with origins in this region, he is a Canadian of Polish, Ukrainian, and Belarusian origins. That is Wayne Gretzky. He famously quipped, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." So down below is the application form. And the breeze coming off the Black Sea here. It is a little bit chilly. It was snowing last week and this place was absolutely white, but now it's all melted. It's actually increased a little bit in temperature, so it's melted away. But I'm rambling on at the end of this video, and it is a Do Pobачення, Slava Ukraini, Horom Slava, Do Перемоги from Odessa, Mama, on the shores of the Black Sea in southern Ukraine. See you in the next video.
SAR Experience.